Thank you. The gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Sanders, is recognized for his testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think I'm going to be picking up right where Maxine Waters left off. Mr. Chairman, we have heard a whole lot about welfare reform. I want to tell you that I am not particularly impressed by members of Congress who can cut back on school lunch programs, cut back on WIC, or eliminate the fuel assistance program, LIHEAP, which serves some 5 million people in this country. In my state, Mr. Chairman, the weather gets 20 or 30 below zero, and we have elderly people who have to make the choice between whether or not they buy the prescription drugs they need to stay alive or whether they heat their home. So I'm not impressed by the courage of eliminating the LIHEAP program. And I'll pick up from where Maxine Waters left off. When we talk about welfare, let's talk about welfare for the rich and the powerful. Now, we start off from a proposition that the wealthiest 1% of the population in this country owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. So if we're going to talk, I guess it's not interesting, Mr. Chairman? Would you mind? All right. So if we have the courage to cut back on school lunch programs for hungry kids and fuel assistance for elderly people who can't heat their homes, let us in fact see how much courage we have in taking on the big money interests who have so much influence in this country. Now, I come to you not as a Democrat, but as an independent, aware that it is not just the Republican Party that recently held a fundraising dinner that raised $11 million in one night for some of the wealthiest people in America. Aware that Mr. Gingrich held a $50,000 a plate fundraising dinner to raise money for conservative television network. I am also aware that the Democrats do similar type effort. And the result of all of that makes people believe that some people are able to crack down on the poor who don't vote, on the poor who are having a very difficult time keeping their ends together, staying alive, but they're not willing to take on the big money interest. Let me make some specific suggestions. As you know, and I think Mr. Goss referred to this, there have been a number of studies, and interestingly enough, from a broad spectrum of political ideology about corporate welfare. You are or should be aware of the fact that the right-wing Cato Institute did a study. The Progressive Policy Institute, moderate Democrats, did a study about corporate welfare. The Joint Taxation Committee of the Congress did a study about corporate welfare. The Green Scissors Report, which was the combined effort of the Friends of the Earth, the National Taxpayers Union, did a study about corporate welfare. The Grace Commission and Public Citizen, Nada's group, Public Citizen, did a study on corporate welfare. Mr. Chairman, what I would respectfully suggest, and we have made this request, some of us in the Progressive Caucus have made this request of the Speaker. We have requested that the Speaker do what many people were talking about last session in terms of the A to Z proposal. Let us have time on the floor of the House where every member of Congress can come up and present specific ideas and suggestions as how we can eliminate tax breaks for the rich and corporate welfare. Number two, what I would respectfully suggest of this committee, you have a whole lot of experts out there, as you well know, who are outside of Congress, from different political ideologies. Spend time, take several days, hear what they have to say, because the American people, I think, are not impressed when we cut back on school lunch programs or fuel assistance for poor people, and we don't have the guts to take on big money interests. Maxine Waters gave you a few examples. Let me mention a few more. Example number one, foreign corporations with subsidiaries in America like Toyota and Nissan underpay their U.S. taxes by between $25 and $30 billion a year. Let's have a study on that. Let's bring these people in here. Let's demand that they pay their fair share of taxes before we cut back on Head Start or programs that middle-income workers in America need. Number two, American taxpayers are now required through the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC, to provide hundreds of millions of dollars for American Fortune 500 companies to take our jobs overseas, and billions more, incredibly, to ensure their risky investments abroad. Now, that issue interests me for two reasons. Number one, I don't think we should continue that type of corporate welfare. It's a waste of taxpayers' money, but it is a double crime when these same people are taking American jobs to third world countries. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if you could give me an opinion on this. Mr. Chairman, this is from the OPIC report itself, and we're happy, obviously, to leave it with you. This is what it says on page 4, 1992 annual report. Quote, OPIC, that's the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, assists U.S. investors, often Fortune 500 companies, through three principal programs. Number one, financing investment projects through direct loans and loan guarantees. Number two, ensuring investment projects against political risks. Follow that? There's a revolution, nationalization. We're ensuring that against those risks. Number three, providing investor services, including advisory services, computer-assisted project investor matching, country and regional information, and investment missions. Quote, I like this one, all of OPIC's guarantee and insurance obligations are backed by the full faith and credit of the United States of America, as well as by OPIC's own substantial reserves. In other words, in a third world countries, there is a revolution. Somebody burns down your factory. Isn't it nice to know that having invested in that country, perhaps by throwing American workers out on the street, you have the full faith and credit of the taxpayers of America to protect your overseas investment? Is that something you think you're a conservative? Is that something that you think the United States government should be involved in? Example number three, millions more in tax dollars through the Agency for International Development, the Commerce Department, and other federal agencies help U.S. companies shift jobs and production to foreign export processing zones. Example number four, at least $40 billion a year in special interest corporate tax loopholes that reward U.S.-based multinational corporations for investing and creating jobs overseas rather than reinvesting here in America. I can go on and on. The one area that we have focused on, Maxine Waters focused on a whole other area, many more areas, is we are subsidizing American corporations to throw American workers out on the street, take our jobs to third world countries where they're hiring workers there for $1 an hour. Bottom line is that before we beat up on working people and poor people, my own state of Vermont, yesterday there was a demonstration by hundreds of young people at the University of Vermont, very concerned about cutbacks in the work-study program, Pell Grant program, Stafford loan program. Many of those young people will not be able to afford to go to college. Before we take away that opportunity, fuel assistance for needy people, let's have the guts to stand up to the big money interests. We watch you, and we hope that you will have the courage. But that's the end of my testimony. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Let me, forgetting all the rhetoric and everything, let's get that. Let me ask you a couple questions about. Let me just make a comment to you, Ms. Sanders, rather than get into necessarily a question or answer session. I'm interested in the issue you raised on the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. You know that this committee has recommended that we kill the ATP program, the Advanced Technology Program, where the government uses millions of dollars to give to very well-to-do corporations. Because I don't believe, and this committee has not believed, that we should subsidize IBM and Anderson Consulting. I mean, we're making some steps in this area. We just met this morning to talk about what we can do about some of the issues that have plagued the Congress for a long time: minerals, timber. We're going to look. You know, these are not easy. From the standpoint
Why are they not easy?
Let me just say, when I say they're not easy, not from the standpoint that you got special interests who beat you down. You want to make sure you get the facts and you do the right thing. But I wanted to say about OPIC, I think you raise a very good point on OPIC. Now, I don't have all the background on OPIC, but you raise a very good point, and I've just told staff I want OPIC to be on the list. I think we need to take a look at it. I don't know if the gentleman is aware, but I've instructed staff here to take a look at the tax advantages that accrue to corporations that go to Puerto Rico.
Right.
Do the best we can at trying to take a look at some of this, and I think we've already taken some steps in this committee to trim back some subsidies that we think are not justified. And I also want you to know that I got this morning 2 copies of the Cato study that I intend to review over the weekend, and we're going to look at it carefully.
Would there be a possibility, again, the only point, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. You have made some cuts which are going to hurt a whole lot of people. There's no debate about that, correct? And obviously, you made those cuts because you think in the long-term best interest of America, we have to save that money. Now, you and I have a disagreement about priorities. I respect your sincerity in that. All that I'm saying is that if you're going to tell low-income senior citizens in the state of Vermont, where the weather gets 30 below zero, that we can't help them pay their fuel bills, I think you have a deep moral obligation to make sure that not 1 cent of taxpayers' money goes to subsidize wealthy corporations who can take care of their own needs. And I think there's never, the gentleman here asked before, Maxine, when did this discussion begin? Some of us have been at it for a number of years, but probably right now, because of the savage cuts that are being proposed in Medicaid, Medicare, other very important areas, never before has there been a time where we need to take a better look at corporate welfare because of the cuts that are coming down on vulnerable populations.
Let me, does the gentleman have any questions?
Well, my only comment is that I wish I could claim that we were smart enough to have done this as a strategy, that we cut, as you said, savage cuts to women and children and all that other rhetoric that we hear.
You think that a cut...
So that you all would come to the table and propose all of these corporate welfare cuts as well, and so now we've got everybody at the table, and we're doing exactly what we wanted to do in the first place, which is reduce the size and cost of federal government, not in an effort, certainly not an effort, and you know that this is the case, to hurt anybody, but to bring some fiscal responsibility to the federal government, and also to try to encourage personal responsibility and encourage states and communities and neighborhoods and families to take responsibility of their own, because we have miserably failed at all of the federal programs that have tried to substitute for mom and dad and for parents and so on and so forth.
Is there a chance, Mr. Chairman, that you would be prepared to have a special session of this committee on corporate welfare where you can bring in best people in Congress and the best people outside of Congress to help? This is complicated stuff, and I'm not here to tell you that I know all the ins and outs of it.
I think it's an interesting idea. I don't want to say to the gentleman it's going to be done, and if I can't get it scheduled. I mean, the problem we've got is we're running out of time, but I think it's another idea that has merit, and we give it some consideration.
Thank you
see
very much.
If something like that can be worked out. Other questions for the gentleman?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Bernie. And this isn't the first time Bernie Sanders has been saying this, nor the Progressive Caucus. And we really should make time on the Budget Committee because for some reason, when we talk about corporate welfare, people get excited and then it just disappears. So I'd like to help you and tell you I'll be there at those hearings if we could do it, those discussions.
Thank you.
Let me just say to the gentleman again that you know, just the action that was taken by this committee to kill the Advanced Technology Program was, I think, a very positive step in the direction of determining whether some subsidies are appropriate or not. And there are other things that we have done. There are research that should be conducted by the private sector that government is subsidizing. But you know, the issue of corporate welfare gets to be a matter of opinion in many cases. Because it happens to be a defense program, somebody calls it corporate welfare. Now, I've taken on my share of defense programs, but I don't think B2 necessarily is corporate welfare. It's just a legitimate difference of opinion. I don't want to get into a big debate here today, Bernie, about increases in school lunch and whether we did enough, and LIHEAP, which was created for an energy crisis and all that. I want to because I'm not going to debate you on that today, is not meant for the people or the record to show that I'm not in very strong disagreement with some of the statements you've made today, but you've made some very, I think, positive statements, and I believe you got to listen to what people have to say and do the best you can, and I hope that we'll have additional changes in the area of subsidies that have gone to certain people, and make sure that we have a fair
I
package.
thank you. Let me just conclude, Mr. Chairman, by saying I have the privilege of chairing the Progressive Caucus, which now has 40 members, and this is an issue of deep concern to, I think, virtually every member of the Progressive Caucus as well. Okay,
I
thank
appreciate
you
you,
very much.
gentlemen.